Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm your host, Doug Falconer, Agriculture Director at GX94 in Yorkton. I'm joined by 620 CKRM Agri-News Director Ryan Young and the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi,
Good
Doug.
day, good day.
We'll first talk about the advance payments program, and I know there was a big announcement regarding that early in the week. Ryan, I think you were on top of that.
That's right. Yeah, the APP interest-free portion of the program that's gone up to $250,000. That's up from the original amount of $100,000, which has been there for many years, I guess for as long as I can remember. I spoke with the Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association CEO, Grant McClellan, about that, as well as the president of the Canadian Cattle Association, Nathan Finney, and they were both pleased with the announcement that the interest-free amount has increased. They were both advocating for the $350,000 amount as it was last year, but they'll take the $250,000. It's kind of a start, and they kind of hope maybe it'll go up to that amount soon. But again, for now, it's a good announcement for today.
Your reaction, Kevin?
Well, I thought we might have to wait until the federal budget came out. I was expecting that announcement of the increase might come around budget time. Good on the federal government to get it out in advance and ties in with the April 1st starting time of the cash advance payments program. So a welcome reprieve, especially for producers looking for operating cash for spring expenses. That the interest-free portion is increased from $100,000 to $250,000 makes quite a difference on how far your operating loan will go.
Now, the Canada Grain Act Summit was held in Saskatoon this week. It was co-hosted by the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan and the Saskatchewan Wheat Development Commission, but of course it wasn't limited to those two organizations. I understand there were a lot of other agencies involved in that as well. And it sounds like a standardized grain contract seemed to be the order of the day. Is that what you've heard, Kevin?
Yeah, and I wasn't able to attend, but listening to what you guys reported on it, that still is a major bone of contention among many producers, stemming from the 2021 crop year and a lot of producers short on production contracts or deferred delivery contracts that then increased in price and cost them a lot of money to buy their way out of those contracts. And quite frankly, a lot of grain elevator contracts or buyer contracts in total can be pretty daunting pieces of documents to go through and do seem to be covering all of the bases for the grain company and not the producer. I would say there are some other contracts out there that are one-page contracts that I'm quite pleased with, but it is a major bone of contention. It remains to be seen, though, whether the Canadian Grain Commission will wade into that space. It remains to be seen whether the Canada Grain Act will actually be opened up and changes made. It seems like it gets close to being opened up and something done with it, and then another election comes on and the whole thing is punted forward. I can't count how many times that's actually happened. So there's been very little modernization of the Canada Grain Act.
And I understand some producers have been lobbying for more export data numbers to be available to producers. How do you feel about that?
That's been a request dating way back to when the Canadian Wheat Board monopoly was dismantled. I'm a market analysts would love to have these numbers, and there's times when it would be really useful to know if a particular country or particular entity was making major purchases in Canada. I'm not quite as optimistic that it'll provide as much market intelligence as some people believe. But the US has a reporting program. I think under certain parameters, it could be useful and not onerous on the industry. At a number of the commission meetings a few years ago, there was motions passed telling those commissions to press for an export reporting program. And that too is something laid on the doorstep of Canadian Grain Commission under the Canada Grain Act.
And speaking of the Canadian Grain Commission, Kevin, you reported on a story regarding Zegers Canada.
Zegers Canada, and it's not a grain buyer that I'd really heard of out in Holland, Manitoba, buys lots of specialty crops, a wide range of crops. apparently in financial difficulty. The Canadian Grain Commission pulled their bond and advised producers if they're owed money by Zegers to contact them. And that spurred me, and I was already working on the issue of deferred grain checks. If you deliver grain and when the payment is ready to come, you say, "Oh no, defer it till the next fiscal year. I want to even out my taxes." That's a very dangerous thing to do. That Canadian Grain Commission security on producer payments only accounts for a month. So if you got a deferred grain check that's more than a month old, you have no protection. And I fully expect in the Zegers Canada situation, there will be, or there certainly could be, producers with deferred grain checks that are too old and will not be eligible for compensation.
Well, that's too bad. And of course, one of the other things we were looking at this week was the price of canola. It jumped up rather sharply on Monday, and then it just declined Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Brian, you had a chance to speak with Adam Pacalo on that.
That's right. And I've been watching kind of the prices at Viterra of canola. I believe at the Moose Jaw terminal there. It, like you say, it shot up on Monday, and then it just steadily declined each day after that this week. And for the May contract, Adam said it was no different. It went down a few dollars a ton this week. Not really good news on the soybean front. That's kind of one of the factors. And one of the things he's kind of looking out for in the future is a USDA report that was being released at around 11 o'clock our time. So I'm going to be following him up on that report and get his thoughts on how that is going to affect the canola market as well as the wheat market. The Minneapolis wheat contract, I should mention as well, that was kind of on a downward trend as well. So kind of a down week after the last 2 weeks where it was kind of up or kind of plateauing. So we'll see what happens moving forward.
Kevin, your reaction to the canola drop again this week?
Disappointing. It when it starts to show some life, then it trails off like it did this week. So it'll be really interesting to see as the USDA report is analyzed whether that lends some support or whether other factors can lend some support. I have the feeling there's still a great deal of unpriced 2023 canola on the books that producers are wondering what the heck to do with.
All right, and of course, it's the last weekend of March, so that means come April 1st, we're looking at a carbon tax hike. I think it's 3 cents a liter, I've heard, when it comes to fuel anyway. What's your reaction to that news?
Well, it's the whole carbon tax issue is a very hot potato politically between the provincial and federal governments, and the whole opposition move in Ottawa to spike the hike and then axe the tax, I believe, is resonating with a lot of Canadians. But there's a lot of debate back and forth on how much rebates people receive versus how much they pay, and whether the carbon tax is effective. But I don't believe that the April 1st increase will be the end of this. It's going to carry on right through into the federal election whenever that happens, even if it's well into 2025.
Ryan, anything on that for your point of view?
Yeah, I kind of saw a couple of interviews, or one interview the other day that Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe was doing about the carbon tax right after he spoke with the House of Commons committee about the hike that's coming up on April 1st, this coming Monday. And he was challenged on some of the claims that he was making, one of which was the carbon tax, increasing costs by 30%, which in reality it's kind of a fraction of the cost, as well as a question I heard on the show today from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. She was testifying before the committee as well about the carbon tax. Liberal MP on the committee asked her, if you're so concerned about axing the tax, why doesn't the Alberta government cut the fuel tax that they have? And so there was a bit of a back and forth, he said, she said kind of a deal. So like Kevin said, it's a hot button issue and a lot of finger pointing back and forth on this. It's a very sensitive thing. But with all that said and done, carbon tax is going to go up on Monday by about 23%.
And I think the bigger issue, and when you look at the big picture of things, Kevin, I mean, I think most Canadians realize we need to do something about our emissions, but I think Canada in general is one of the lower emitters. I look at China and India and Russia. I hear they're some of the largest emitters in the world, and I'm not sure if they're doing anything about it. I think that's probably what frustrates me the most, is that we're expected to do something about it when the big emitters don't seem to be doing anything.
I think most people can support the idea of trying to reduce our emissions within reason, but Canada, as I understand it, accounts for only 1.5 or 1.6% of global emissions. So what we do here really doesn't have a big impact on the world total emissions. And if it's like having a swimming pool with a no pee zone. It doesn't really work, because we're all in the same atmosphere here. So yes, we should be doing what we can within reason to reduce emissions and cut fossil fuel use. And I believe there's things we can do in that regard, but I don't think we need to wreck our economy because what China or India or Russia does or doesn't do with regards to emissions dwarfs our efforts. So I also really wonder how effective the carbon tax is in reducing emissions, and you get varying reports on that, but I don't think it's the most efficient way to go about it to start with. But again, just my opinion.
All right. Any final comments on that, Ryan?
That's about all I have. It is what it is, and we'll see where it goes.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of Chief Agricultural Editor Kevin Hirsch and 620 CKRM Agri-News Director Ryan Young, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Faulkner saying so long until next week.